I got in my cruiser and headed for Ashwood Heights, preparing myself for the worst part of my job. But by the time I pulled up to the Palmer residence, it was getting close to 5 already. The surrounding neighborhood was all done up for Halloween. Crows on porches, plastic skeletons hanging from nooses and swinging in the breeze. Cotton was spread thin across bushes, with fat rubber spiders lying in wait across the makeshift webbing. And the strangest house by a damn mile was the Palmers'. The house had 2 windows that faced the street, and each had been boarded up with plywood. They'd been painted with a coat of orange so dark it was nearly red. And on top of that, someone had painted long black masks. I hadn't seen anything like it in my life. The design was intricate, symbols and lines all flowing together like shit, I don't know. It's as hard to remember now as it was to look at then. All those lines, intersecting patterns, like that fancy writing on wedding invites. Calligraphy, that's it. Looked like calligraphy, done in a made-up language, painted on masks by a goddamn psycho. I got out of the cruiser and made my way up the sidewalk to the front porch. Dead leaves crackling beneath my feet. Nearly jumped out of my skin when the door swung open just as I was about to knock. Wayne Palmer stood there in the doorway, his face pale, one hand still on the doorknob. "Sheriff, thank God. Is this about Amy? She left last night and I haven't seen her since. When I heard your car, I was hoping it was her." Mr. Palmer, please, call me Wayne." "Wayne, could I come inside?" Wayne's hopeful expression collapsed. Oh no, please." There wasn't going to be an easy way to say it. There never was. "Wayne," I said softly, "we believe we found Emmy on Quincy Avenue. She's gone." He shook his head sharply. "No, can't be." Deputy Silver recognized a tattoo on her arm. "Now you, of course, have the final say in identifying her. But yeah, Wayne, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty damn sure it's her." "You don't get it," Wayne said, a silent tear rolling down his face, tracing the line of his cheek. "If Emmy's gone, then it's over. It's all over. She went too soon." I nodded. "She did, Wayne. She sure as hell did. Is there anything I can do? Maybe call somebody for you? Any relatives that can help?" Wayne shook his head again, his eyes vacant. "They're all dead now." Okay then. Well, I'll call you as soon as we get her ready for you to identify. Once again, I'm sorry for your loss. Truly. I can make this right, Sheriff," he said, "if I hurry." I'm sure I looked puzzled. What else would I have looked like? He wasn't making any sense, but grief does strange things, so I just nodded, tipped my hat, and walked back to the cruiser. My ass had barely hit the seat when Silva came over the radio. "Boss, you there?" I thumbed the button. "Yeah, Silva?" "The peanut guys are here, and the enemy got a better look at her other side." I rubbed my eyes with one hand and pinched the bridge of my nose, readying myself for whatever craziness was about to land in my lap. "All right, Silva, tell me." "Well, it's kind of hard to describe, because the damn thing's in pieces, but it looks like she was wearing some kind of mask." My gaze immediately landed on the boarded windows on the Palmer's house. "Let me take a wild stab in the dark on this one," I said. "Orange, maybe red, with black lines and shit drawn all over it." It took a second for Silva to respond. "Yeah, that's it. How did you know that?" "Lucky guess," I said, and sighed. I'll meet you back at the office. We can talk about it there. Okay, sounds good, boss. Let's hope the rest of Halloween happens without any more crazy shit. I started the cruiser's engine. Your lips to God's ears, Silva. Yeah, we hoped. But sometimes hope don't amount to shit. By the time I pulled into our parking lot, the sun had dipped below the tree line, and the sky was purple in the twilight. I headed for my office, hoping to relax for a damn minute, and was surprised to find someone waiting on me. Along with Tom Lester. I said, and sat down in my chair. So nice to see you again so soon. Listen, Roy, he said, his lips almost flattened his next word. I'm sorry, okay? I should have laughed. It wasn't funny. Holy shit, I said to Silva. I got a dead woman splattered in the middle of nowhere. And Tom Lester just apologized. This day is chock full of surprises. I thought at least I'd get a smile from Silva, but his face was starting. Give him a chance. I turned to the chair and faced. Shoot. I know why it happened, Dawn said. And it's pretty obvious how she died. Don't need my report. Here. Something is wrong here, Roy. That math thing on, but I can't even look at it without my head aching. And that tattoo wasn't the only one, either.
Oh shit, I've seen this movie.
Hiding. And I know we're a bit more liberal about things now. A woman with a lot of tattoos trying to keep it a secret really wasn't a shame to me at the time. Well, I'm sure she had her reason. I said, gotta be something else that's got you so spooked. She had frostbite, Roy, Ellen said. I couldn't tell it until we turned her over. But it's sure there. Her face, her fingers, her toes, you name it. I laughed, not because it was funny, just because what the hell I was supposed to do with that information. But let me think this through. Tammy Palmer was freezing, still alive enough to get frostbite, then exploded. Don shook his head. I don't know what to tell you, Roy. The frostbite is there. I don't have any idea why, but it's there. Noted, I said. Silva, would you escort Don here? Well, I'm sure he's got paperwork to do or something. Don stood, his chest puffed out and his hands shaking. I can see myself out. Think about what I said, Roy. Something funny is going on here. What in the hell? I said. Frostbite? I ain't seen frostbite in maybe never. Silva leaned against the wall and looked up to the ceiling. We're getting further away from the trees. Pretty good. Sometimes that's just the way it is, I said. I ain't more about it tonight. Won't you go? Let the get up there to get some candy. What's your get up this year? Fred right into it, Silva said with a smile. Dress up this year. I really don't feel like wearing a mask after today. I laughed. Ain't that the damn truth? Go home, Silva. Thanks, boss, he said. I'll see you in the morning. Have a good one, I said. He stopped at the door. Oh, and that get the hell out of here, Silva. I said. And laughed. I pulled a new folder from the desk, grabbed the pen, and wrote Emily Palmer across the top.
Enemy at the door. Reloading. Securing Alpha. Lost Charlie. Reloading.
I was about finished with the initial report when the phone rang. Look, Bush County Sheriff, I said, looking at the watch. It was after 9 already. Mrs. Baker, is everything okay?
Enemy at the courtyard. We're holding 2. We have the advantage.
I grabbed my notepad from the pocket.
Contact.
What was he wearing tonight? Probably a good idea, I said. All right, Mrs. Baker. I'll be around there shortly to take a look.
Stand by.
I stood and snapped the clock. I didn't even get both my arms in the sleeves before the phone rang again. I picked up the receiver and held it between my head and shoulder. Bush County Sheriff. Now I knew Pete. Him and his wife ran a diner that was a favorite haunt of mine. Hey, Pete, what can I do for you? I said, my wheels turned in the direction I didn't want to go. I'll go ahead that way, Pete. Tell me what she was wearing.
Enemy UAV overhead.
That's one jet.
Charlie.
I wrote it all down. Okay, Pete. I'll get back to you as soon as I know something.
Hold all the objectives.
I pressed the button to get a new line and dialed Silver's number. His wife Maria picked up. Yeah, that's what I figured. Will you tell him to get me on the
We're
radio
on
when
Alpha.
you see
Stand
him?
by.
She
Enemy UAV
said,
overhead.
no, I said, everything is not good.
Need backup at Bravo.
Yeah, just had to ask you something.
That's for you
I
guys.
gotta get on the road. Thanks, Maria. She said, I
Hostiles are
didn't
taking
run out of
Charlie.
my office, but I damn sure was doing more than
Reload.
walking. I jumped in the street and pulled out onto a highway. Flipped the flashes on, horses and blue. But I left the siren off. Didn't want the panic mode. All these years later, and I still actually rich. Made it to Asheville Heights and Redding, but slowed down in the city proper, wary of kids still running around the streets. I cruised at a crawl, scanning from side to side, looking for any kids that matched the
Enemy holds all
descriptions their
objectives.
parents had given
We're
me.
on Alpha. Stand by.
I saw plenty of ghosts, a few witches, cartoon characters, I couldn't tell you then or now, and no vampire OGs. About 10 minutes into my search, I found myself
We're holding
still
Charlie.
in uniform and standing stock still on the
Assist the team at
sidewalk,
Alpha.
alone. I stopped the cruiser next to him and got out. Silver, I said, what are you doing? He looked at me like he'd just woke
Securing
up.
B.
Boss?
Climbing explosion.
Where's Jesse? I asked as I walked over to him.
We've got Bravo.
He looked down, confused. She was right here. I put a hand on his shoulder. Hurry up. Wake up, son. I got calls about 2 missing kids. I don't know where Jesse is. He said, and we came up to this house and knocked. I don't know what happened next.
Starfight.
I looked up at the house, and I was surprised and unsurprised in equal measure. The black mass painted on the boarded over windows seemed to look right at me. Some people were stepping down from the porch. Stay right here, Silva.
Hostile
I
target.
approached the group. I said, I'm Sheriff Harrison. Have any of you seen... Where's James? James! The man closest to me suddenly cried out and then fell silent, blinking, and continued with the trail. I turned and yelled for Silva. Silva, come with me. He continued to stand, swaying with the breeze. Deputy Silva, that's an order. He shook his head. All right, boss. I'm with you. We stepped on Palmer's on that porch, and I thought he was a revolver. Silva looked at me, alarmed, but he followed suit. I knocked twice. Wayne, it's Sheriff Harrison. Mind coming to the door? I just have a few questions that need answering. The knob turned and the door creaked open. Wayne stood there, backlit by 6 burning candles on a table. Sweat ran from his head, down his neck, and over his bare chest. Tattoos covered most of his torso, running from his clavicles down to his navel. Sheriff, he said weakly, I was hoping you'd come by later, but that's okay. Everything is okay now. Wayne, I said, and then hesitated, looking over the whorls and lines drawn into his skin. We're looking for some missing children. Have you seen any unaccompanied kids around? Wayne nodded. Yes, I took 6 in all. I don't know if I can describe what I felt then. Adrenaline flooded my body, and my stomach seemed to fall right through the ground. I drew my revolver. I'm going to ask you to step back and turn around now, Wayne, I said, trying to sound calm. Let's go ahead and get your hands behind your back. He did as he was told, turning and placing his hands at the small of his back. Silva, cuff him, I said, but Silva didn't move. Wait, I remember. You bastard, he cried. He blew past me, tackled Wayne Palmer to the floor. All of Wayne's breath came out in a rush of air as he hit the hardwood. This pendejo to Jesse, Silva said, pinning Wayne's arms down. He fucking trapped me or something. Shit, I don't know, but he took her, boss. I knelt beside Wayne. His head was against the hardwood, his cheek pressed flat. Blood running from both nostrils. Where are the kids, Wayne? I said. Don't make this shitty situation any worse. Just tell us where they are.
Next hard point. Let's go. Enemy control in the AO. Got the hard point.
But she wouldn't listen. Each night, I said. Wayne looked at me like I was on this man on planet Earth. Do you think it's a ritual? Even if most of us watch it fire! Every year,
Ready. We're about to move.
Taking off. Everything the jealous man has in your town, they said
Enemy's taking the hard point.
I thought you could find the window for sale. Out of office. Between the worlds began.
Hard point.
Year after year. Arguing about over the supper when y'all showed up.
Hard point.
Anything if you I'll stay with you. I already told you that.
Ready, we're about to move. Specialist achieved.
All you have to do is listen to look in.
Next hard point. Let's go.
Just fight and do it.
Enemy's taking the hard point. Enemy in the center.
Where's my dog?
Get out. Enemy at the forklift. Enemy took the hard point. Hard point secure. Enemy at the forklift. Mission accomplished. Regroup. Return to base.
People had come out of their homes and were looking around to each other.
Enemy at the
Yeah. Up there! And we did. Dark shapes were speeding towards us from the sky, screaming and screeching. For a second, I believed Wayne Palmer. I was convinced that ghosts or demons or some otherworldly shit had broken through, and they were coming for us. But then I remembered Amy Palmer, and realization struck me like lightning. Go back inside, Silva, I said. What? Why? He said. What's happening? Julio, please go, I cried. Get away from here! But it was too late. There were no demons descended from the clouds, just 6 costumed children, screaming in terror as they fell from God knows how high up in the sky. High enough to get frostbite, I knew that. High enough to where the air was thin and cut like a blade of ice. I'm not going to describe what happened. If you've listened this far, then you can imagine. The fate of Emmy Palmer and the fates of those children were one and the same, right down to the masks on their faces. The world erupted in screams. Parents screamed and grabbed their children tightly. Children screamed at a mixture of their parents' terror and at the horror that was spread out in the street before their eyes, still spreading. Blood. Blood everywhere. I couldn't move, not an inch. I didn't move when Silva walked over to the crushed heap of bodies. I didn't move when he lifted the red hooded cloak to see what was beneath. And I didn't move when he walked past me, up the porch steps and back into the house, and shot Wayne Palmer 6 times. I tilted my head up to the sky, and up above, way up above, was a face. A face of clouds in the moonlight, of stars in the thin spaces between stars, where reality was pulled taut by the hands of the idiot dead who will not rest. I stared at it, and it stared at me. I finally looked away, unable to stand its gaze any longer. Things get fuzzy from there. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. Truth be told, I didn't remember any of it until this morning when I woke up shivering and tangled in my bed sheets. I remember driving home and feeling like there was a weight, some oppressive force bearing down on me. I remember forgetting. The next day, Silva showed up to work like nothing had happened. At some point, I asked how much candy Jesse ended up with. Who? Silva asked, one eyebrow raised in confusion. I took another sip of my coffee. I started but couldn't finish. Because I didn't know. Not anymore. Over the next few months or so, people began to move around for all sorts of cigarette abuse, better school districts, new jobs. But I know now, the city was just overrun, like it was so deep waste. I stayed home to share. Even though I didn't live in Nashville Heights, I did move farther away. Couldn't have said why, just that I didn't want to be either. Even the buildings had begun. And now that I think of, I don't believe we were alone in the world. I think there's people everywhere that prepare for when things are at their best. When the door is open just a crack.
10
And when
seconds.
it's time, they perform their and everything goes right back to normal. And if everything goes sideways, if some anxious father builds up the wrong campus, then the memories fade and the place becomes nice. I know it's true, because after all these years, because it's Halloween today, and somebody, whoever's on ritual duty here is going to fail tonight. I can feel it somehow.
Enemy cruise missile.
And come to me, will start to wither.
They've reached the halfway point. Get moving.
How many cities have been lost over?
Get ready, we're about to move.
Changing mag.
I just realized
Need the cargo containers.
I needed to tell the story first. Then I have to remind you
Allied UAV overhead. Next hard point.
I've got
Got the hard point.
this city's rich if they're still alive. I need to know what
I'm reloading.
tomorrow. And if there's one where Green Creek,
Fire.
you'll know
Enemy
why.
UAV overhead.
You want it, will you? No one will. It'll just become so far above our heads.
Enemy UAV overhead.
The stars.
I'm reloading.
Enemy VTOL in the AO.
Tales for dark nights.
Enemy Wilson deployed. Stand by.
Get 17 health metrics unique to your body with FitTrack and live your true health.
People are not asking the right questions. They're not asking the right questions because they kind of think they already know the answer.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. The following interactive performance is a first-round entry in Chilling Tales for Dark Nights' 5th annual Evil Idol voice acting competition. And you, listener, get to help decide who advances to round 2. Voting is simple. Following the performance, simply click the thumbs up icon on this video if you'd like this contestant to move forward, or the thumbs down if you'd like to see them be eliminated. Voting on this entry will conclude 1 week after the date of its posting. Thank you, and good luck to all of our contestants.
When I was a kid, my mom thought that the world was a very dangerous place. It wasn't just her either. All parents seem afflicted with this strange mania that made them believe that around every dark corner, in any shadow, lurked something unspeakable ready to snatch up wayward children that stumbled into its grasp. We were told the rules over and over and over. Never take candy from strangers. Always come in before the streetlights turn on. Never go anywhere with someone you don't know, even if they say they were sent by your parents. Always use the buddy system. The 4 commandments of parents, alternating with absolute statements. Never, always, never, always. We would nod solemnly as we were told these rules, but inside we were thinking, so what? No strangers ever offered us candy. You couldn't see outside after dark anyway. No one tried to convince us our parents had been in an accident, so we should go with them. And as far as the buddy system, that could rarely be verified. So we just came and went as we pleased. We felt like it was parents that made it hard to be a kid, not these countless threats that were, as far as we were concerned, imaginary. I remember a visiting neighbor who told Mom about the newest fad in child abduction. The altered appearance trick. A kidnapper would grab an unattended child in a public place like a market or a department store, take them to the bathroom, cut or in some remarkable cases dye their hair, change their clothes, and walk out of the store in plain sight with a brand new child that now didn't match the hysterical parent's description. I thought it was bullshit. Although at 9 years old I'd rather die than use that word in my mother's presence. But she ate it up, her mouth open in terror. Who would do such a thing? She asked the neighbor lady, who wrinkled up her nose and said, "Preverts." I didn't know what a prevert was, but I assumed it was on the same level as strangers, ranked just below Satan himself on Mom's list of people to avoid. You could practically hear the emphasis in her voice when she said the word. An all-capital letter sort of word. Strangers. Halloween was the worst for parental panic. All those masks, each one covering the face of a potential stranger. All the children in town knocking on every door for a stranger to give them candy. The year the newspaper claimed someone was hiding razor blades in chocolate bars was a total nightmare. My mom dumped out all of my candy as soon as I got home and went through each piece with painstaking, almost obsessive thoroughness, which meant that by the time she was done, it was already bedtime, and I'd only eaten 2 or 3 candies. Another thing I considered bullshit and kept my mouth shut about. But the summer I turned 10, kids started getting sick. Not all at once, just one here, one there. We were all on summer vacation, so the first assumption was there was a nasty stomach bug going around, jumping from kid to kid as we attended each other's birthday parties and swimming pools. None of my friends had gotten it yet, but from what I heard in our children's version of the grapevine, it started with vomiting. Lots of it. Then fever, sweating, followed by hallucinations. These kids babbled crazy stories until their fever subsided. Then they were fine. Well, mostly. The part the parents didn't tell each other, but we kids did, it was the best bit. The jump scare at the end of a campfire story was how the ones who got sick were so quiet after. Different. A lot of them even claimed what they saw in their fever dreams was real. One boy, Tommy Anderson, supposedly spent 3 days begging his parents to believe that a 6-headed dog had chased him all the way home the first day he got sick. When they ignored his pleas and instead drilled him about where he'd been before his panic dash to the house, Tommy clammed up, probably to avoid punishment for breaking the buddy system commandment. The kids who'd been there to visit after he got better told anyone who'd listen how he barely said anything while they were there, just stared at his bedroom wall with dead eyes. There were other stories. Other kids who got sick, but after a while it was just boring. It all went the same way, like when classmates came down with chicken pox. The first few were new, rare, and exciting, but after the 7th kid started barfing and ranting about snakes slithering across his ceiling, it was old hat. Summer was too full of promise to worry about some dumb virus that hadn't touched you yet. It was mid-August when I broke the buddy system commandment myself and headed to Main Street, the pocket of my jeans shorts full of pleasantly clicking coins. I'd spent a few days collecting Mom's change from the various places she left it. Kitchen counter, on top of the dryer, between the cushions of the couch, and I had some big plans for the few dollars I'd managed to scrape together. I cut through the neighborhoods like a street-smart tomcat, shaving minutes off my trip, whistling a tune and jiggling my pockets so the coins made a cheerful accompaniment. A field, a few alleyways, and I was at my destination, the Cherry Pop Candy Shop. The Cherry Pop Candy Shop was a staple summer destination. Its jolly storefront seemed to shout at you from between the other bland brick businesses. Come in, come in, come in. The glass door proudly bore a hand-painted logo, all fire engine red and sunshine yellow, with giant juicy cherries replacing the O's in pop and shop. I admired it as I always did when I pushed the door open that day in August, the bells above my head tinkling their announcement of my arrival. Behind the counter, Stanley grinned at me. "Thought I'd be seeing you here soon," he said jovially. "Been setting aside some candy necklaces just for you, Wendy, my dear." Stanley was nice. He owned the cherry pop candy shop, and he always remembered what sweets we liked best. Candy necklaces were my favorite. I'd eat them straight from around my neck until nothing was left but damp, limp string. I had to save up. I jiggled my pocket again so he could hear the coins clinking together. "Mom's been stingy on the change this summer." "What? Don't you do chores for allowance?" Stanley leaned his elbows against the counter and surveyed me briefly. "Mow the lawn or something. We got lots of rain in June. Grass is sprouting up something fierce." I was only halfway listening to him, my attention now on the jars of candy on display like cases of bright, glittering jewels. "Mom says that's boy stuff," I answered, trying to decide between Fun Dip and Pixie Sticks. Your mom's got some funny ideas. She should just put you to work. You look like you could handle it. You're on an awful lot this summer." Stanley paused, then raised his voice a little. "Hey, you want to try something special?" The word recaptured my attention. Special candy. "What is it?" I started to grab a handful of Pixie Sticks, reconsidered, and dropped them back in the bin. If there was special candy, I better save my money. "I already said, it's special." Stanley took out a key from his pocket and unlocked a drawer beneath the counter as I approached. He cast a quick glance at the door. "Now, if I give you a piece of this, you have to promise not to tell anyone else. It's unreleased, straight from the Mars Candy Company. If they find out I'm giving out free samples, they'll have my hide." "I won't tell," I said immediately. His hand was still in the drawer, grasping something. He was scrunching up his face at me, trying to decide if I was trustworthy enough. "I don't know, Wendy. I hear from the other kids you can't keep a secret. Well, they say you're a blabbermouth." "Who says I'm a blabbermouth?" I demanded. "That's bullshit." As soon as the word popped out, I was mortified. I'd said a curse in front of a grown-up. It was nearly as bad as if it had been my own mother. I clapped my hand over my mouth in horror. Stanley started laughing. Not a polite little laugh either. A full-on belly laugh that almost had him bent over. "Okay, Wendy, okay," he chuckled. "I believe you. Such conviction. I hope I never get on your bad side. You're going to be a hard lady to handle someday." I wasn't quite sure what he meant, but he was pulling the special candy out and locking the drawer again, and that's what mattered. Stanley set it on the counter in front of me with the flourished presentation of a stage magician. Ta-da! It was a row of little circular discs, pastel-colored, pale pinks and greens and yellows. The packaging was plain, clear plastic, no logo. The ends were twisted so it couldn't fall open. It was generic, boring, and I felt like I'd seen it before. What a letdown. "Those are just Smarties," I said at last, my voice thick with disappointment. Stanley shook his head earnestly. "No, there's so much more than that." He delicately took the end of the packaging and began to untwist it. He dumped 4 of the candies into his hand and held his palm out toward me. "Try them. I promise. They're fantastic. And you'll be the first person in town who got to eat them before anyone else." That got me. I wouldn't brag about it, of course. Stanley had sworn me to secrecy, and I'd rather die than be a blabbermouth like the other kids said. But I was never first at anything, so I scooped the 4 candies out of his hand and dropped them greedily into my mouth. They were sweet, almost cloyingly so. My teeth ached as I chewed. I was once again disappointed to realize their texture was powdery soft. Even with their extra sweetness, these were definitely just repackaged Smarties. But Stanley was smiling at me, a big, wide, eager smile, and I couldn't tell him the truth, that I thought someone had ripped him off. "They're really good, Stanley," I said, fading enthusiasm. "Well, I mean, for real. Super sweet." Stanley's grin grew wider. He nodded. "Good, good. Do you want some more?" Before I could respond, he had dumped more of them into my palm. I ate them obediently because he was just so excited, so pleased to share this special secret candy with me.
Here they come. Attack.
Like I said, really good. I smacked my lips trying to I could have a glass of water. And his skin faded. His mouth seemed to move. Sadly, no special candy here. What do you like? Not ever word wrong. A sudden jolt of happiness squeezed out of me like at the last second, I had the strength to bend down and put my hands on my knees. That time I became my seat on the floor. A long moment of silence went by. Almost to myself. My face was burning like something. I hadn't been so since I just felt my such a cold during Christmas. I'm spending this time every time there's nothing wrong with the bucket. Standing left his foot on the very counter and sweat past me. It wasn't for me to see. He turned back to me with his hands on his hips. I can't believe that I missed the mess on the floor, Wendy. I'm sorry. I said again, with tears. I could have lashed me with my baby, so I held it back as well as the urge to vomit again, and met his gaze pitifully. Ridiculous request.
Enemy personal radar overhead. Allied UAV overhead.
He took me by the hand.
The halfway point. Get moving.
I tripled him and ensured out of his hold to stop me.
One's down.
I see the enemy. This was a normal empty room. They seem to be melting, losing. One's down. Forgive me. Setting claim. Heartbeat. I keep
Got that bitch.
shoot again.
Reload.
Stanley insisted as he reached for I'll get you some water. Sand for water. Innocent spoon. Bundled with worms.
Enemy UAV overhead.
could feel my face pounding with red-hot heat.
Loading.
Just touch me. Toward me, but now painful. What I was thinking.
Enemy UAV Enemy cruise missile. Shut down, Freddy Claymore. Lost the lead.
I thought again. Flying, barreling through the swinging door back into the cherry pop candy shop.
Well done. Command will be...
My hands beat uselessly at the glass until I remembered. The lock. My fingers actioned and launched myself into the outside. And my whole body was throbbing with an almost unbearable heat. But I ran aimlessly down Main Street, knowing that if Stanley touched me, it was over. I would simply burst, and there would be nothing left of me. I don't remember much beyond that. I'm told I flew straight down the road begging people for help, telling them I was on fire and that the candy shop owner was made of worms. It was my escape that made it possible, that connected the previously scattered pieces of the puzzle. The memory loss, that was a pretty common side effect. Most of the other kids couldn't remember where they'd been when they first got sick. Either that or they wouldn't tell. Turns out I wasn't the first kid in town to try the special candy like Stanley said. I told you, I never first did anything. Turns out I was right. They were just Smarties. Smarties soaked in liquid LSD. He'd started out careful, only giving a piece or two to select children, spacing them out over the course of weeks so as not to draw suspicion. And he couldn't stop. By the time I walked into his shop that day, Stanley was giving out triple the dose he'd started with. Mom refused to tell me what happened to the other kids. The ones who went through that door that I insisted was tiny. Too tiny for anyone to fit through. Whenever I asked, she just told me I was lucky. Luckier than the rest. She said it like it was a good thing, but she always got upset when I brought it up, turning her face from me to hide the fact that she was crying. The 4 commandments of parents had failed her, and she knew it. Never take candy from strangers. But Stanley hadn't been a stranger. That was the problem. He was the candy man, and he was supposed to be safe. To this day, I wonder what was behind that door. How he got the other kids through it. What he did to them back there. I can't eat sweets.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, reminding you that if you haven't already, don't forget to vote for this contestant via either a thumbs up or a thumbs down vote, and help decide who becomes the next evil idol. Until next time, turn off the lights and turn on the...
Goddamn.
Enemies over there. The less you weigh, the healthier you are. We've all been sold a lie. Because health is not one size fits all. Your weight does not define you. You define you. Get 17 health metrics unique to your body with picture and live your truth.
Homeowners, we're giving away free patio covers. For zero money down, and you don't need good credit. Just change your high electric bills for a lower monthly amount by putting solar panels on your roof, and we install a new patio cover in your backyard for free. The new patio cover can be...
Join tales for dark nights.
To make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Hey, Creep. I want to tell you a tale. If you're ready to hear it. It may not be pleasant. It may not be the way you want it to. But this story is fascinating. And as fascinating as it is, shockingly horrifying.
Changing max.
Are you ready? My name's Cole, and you're listening to Tales. Imagine this. You're leaving the theater with friends. The credits roll. You get up and walk outside. You and your friends part ways and you start walking across the parking lot.
UAV overhead.
The wind digs into your clothes, giving you goosebumps. Blinding you to your dark surroundings. Maybe you're texting your significant other. The film is over. On my way. Between the sound of distant cars driving, skittering across the pavement. The hairs on the back of your neck rise. Every in your life eerily mirrors a scene in the movie you just watched. Your heart starts to race a little. You're breathing a little heavier, exhaling fumes of fear. You whip your head around, but you see nothing. It's pitch black. You're still blinded by your phone. Pure panic erupts in your belly. You can see your car under alert. Safety. But you can also see the future. A masked man in black, wearing thick leather gloves and wielding a knife, is behind you. You run. Your feet pound the pavement. The wind whips up dramatically, pushing against you, slowing you down. You have your keys in your hand, and as you get within feet of your car, you press unlock, open the door, into the driver's seat, closing the door behind you. Your eyes are shut tight. Your breath comes to a hold. You slowly gather your courage and look outside the window. The parking lot is empty. You thought you were falling into the void just 10 seconds ago, but it's just a movie theater parking lot. You shake your head and feel silly for being afraid.
Counter UAV activated.
Sound familiar?
Friendly sentry gun online.
We all have intrusive thoughts. And that's natural, especially after seeing a horror film. You just spent the last 2 hours empathizing with the unknown victim and in part experiencing their fear and terror. It's vanity fear, though. Fear, but you aren't in any danger yourself. exposure therapy, filling you with small doses of anxiety and stress, making you more acutely aware to the dangers of the world. Maybe there isn't present danger, though. Perhaps it's just paranoia. But unlike the victim in the movie, you wake up. So have your breakfast and have a perfectly normal day. Like you and I, my creepy friend, many people don't empathize with the victim. Some people are filled with disappointment and envy when watching the horror movie villain committing their atrocities. Some even hate their own movie. On October 3rd, Gilles Tetreault found himself on Edmonton's south side, connected to downtown by a series of highways and completely surrounded by the prairies of northern Alberta. One moment you could be at the mall shopping, and no more than a 5 minute away, be out in the middle of nowhere on a dirt road. New to the city and recently separated from his wife, Tetreault was lonely and looking to get back into the dating pool. The 33-year-old contractor turned to the dating site to solve his loneliness. Plenty of Fish. And it was on Plenty of Fish where Tetreault met a woman with the username Ssdd. Her real name was Sheena. She was young and beautiful, 5'6" with blonde hair and blue eyes. But most importantly, Tetreault found her intelligent and interesting to talk to. She was also interested in Tetreault, seeming anxious and borderline insistent that they meet in real life. So when Sheena finally emailed Gilles Tetreault, suggesting dinner and a movie, Tetreault happily and eagerly agreed. On Friday, October 3rd, 2008, Gilles got ready for his date. He probably wore something nice, as we all do, hoping to make a good first impression on a woman he enjoyed talking to. Sheena gave Tetreault her address and told him to pick her up. As he got into her neighborhood, he pulled down a residential alley and then to what Sheena had told Tetreault was her garage. Gilles arrived at 3 after 7 p.m. He parked in front of the garage door, which had been left partly open in anticipation of his arrival. Where Tetreault had expected to meet Sheena, instead he saw nothing but a pitch-black room. And then someone began to attack him with a cattle prod, the blue light of the electricity flashing brilliantly in the dark room. Above him, Tetreault saw a man towering over him. It was then that Tetreault knew this wouldn't end up being the date he'd expected. A moment of surreal silence hung between the two men. The masked man reached into his pocket and pulled out a gun, which he pointed towards him. Tetreault was pushed to the ground, his eyes now covered with duct tape. Intended to do to him, Gilles decided to go out on his own terms. He leapt to his feet, ripping the duct tape, seeing the man with the gun still standing there, the gun already out and pointing directly at him. Tetreault lunged and grabbed the gun, and as he did, a spring of hope welled up inside him, as he realized the gun was a painted toy. The masked man began punching Tetreault as he struggled through the garage door. Falling backwards and rolling underneath the partially open garage door, Tetreault crawled to his car. His legs were numb and didn't listen to him when he willed them to walk. The masked man got out of the garage, straight for him, beginning to drag Tetreault back. At that moment, a couple were walking by. Tetreault screamed for help. The couple saw Tetreault, but feared that it was an elaborate hoax, and that both the man in the mask and Tetreault were planning to rob both of them. Instead of helping, they ran home and called police. But when police arrived, Gilles and the man in the hockey mask were gone.
A fluke diving accident the day before my high school graduation left me completely paralyzed, but a stem cell treatment helped me move my arms again. Prop 14
Gilles Tetreault made a mistake, and one I hope none of you make. He went to go meet someone he didn't know, who he thought he knew, but had met online without telling anyone where he was going to be that evening. He was alone in the city, and it's this loneliness that drove him to seek companionship on Plenty of Fish. Edmonton, where the edges of the city fall off into sprawling endless prairies and ditches and small forests down gravel back roads, Tetreault had told no one where he was going. A week later, on October 10th, 2008, another man put on a nice clean shirt, maybe some cologne, and set out to pick up his date for the evening, following a set of directions. A set of directions to the very same garage that Gilles Tetreault had been the previous Friday. John Altinger was going to meet a woman named Jen, who he had also met on Plenty of Fish.
No prisoners.
John was 28 years old. He was passionate about motorcycles, but never offline for long. As he drove to meet Jen for the first time, John was characteristically texting a friend to run the commentary of his evening, even going so far as to forward the directions to where they were meeting. Just after 7 p.m., he sent a text saying he had arrived. After that text, silent and offline, no messages in, and no messages out. 2 days later, on Thanksgiving, John Altinger missed a much anticipated motorcycle ride. That's when his friends and family found the way. They were flying along with unlike John. He wouldn't be able to make the motorcycle ride. Everyone decided to clear him. Something was wrong. Then, on the Monday of the long Thanksgiving weekend, John sent everyone a text. I met this extraordinary woman named Jen. He then proceeded to say he would be going to location. Christmas time. Began calling everyone John knew. He had seen mistaken to John. And it was time to call the police. We briefly found that the response was wait and see. Wait and see? Something was wrong with his friend, and everyone police wanted to wait and see. But later that day, they returning to find what was happening with their baby. His clothes. They found his suitcase. They found his house. John went to the location. Armed with his own and back to police. He insisted something different. They showed him the text he had left or was leaving on vacation, and showed police John's passport, which he could leave the country without. This time, police took them seriously, and investigators already had a head start on everything that had happened to John Altinger, because unlike Shield, Altinger could understand and how to get there. On October 18th, investigators followed those directions. The same group with the last 3 weeks had run multiple days. Police spoke to the landlord and found contact info for the individual who rented the garage. And on October 18th, 2008, independent with 20 police agents and investigators felt their suspicion towards Patricia was agreed to show them the garage. As they inspected the garage, his garage had been broken. Police investigated the case, a skilled interviewer reviewed the footage of the question. Was his body language was appeared to an avoiding questions. The witness opinion was determined he was being upfront and honest. They found the police elsewhere. Twitter was the 2 weeks had now passed since John had gone missing, and police were at the conclusion that they might need to be looking for a body. And this is when they turned to looking for tips. And the couple who had seen John actually in house and had run home to the police were finally called in for questioning. Sitting in the interrogation room, the couple told the man they had seen being attacked, the one they thought might have been part of a two-man scheme to rob them, John Alton. They were stricken with remorse. They thought they had left a man to die. They would piece together their story. They realized that this took place a week before John had his date. They had to the same way. Investigators shifted their tactics now at this new knowledge. They were now looking for two men. One they knew was 28-year-old John Altinger, who had last been discovered Friday weekend, and the second man, still unknown to police, who was seen by the couple being attacked. Investigators didn't have much to work with. They couldn't put out and crime and even did so the police once again reached out to the public, looking for more information. He hadn't come home to report the event. If he was alive, why hadn't investigators been contacted? Was he a married man keeping a scandalous rendezvous secret from his wife? It wasn't a crime at all. Maybe this was just bizarre circumstance.
Your TV is loud.
Instead, it was fear. And you can't blame Gilles. I can't. And I know you, my creepy friend, are more understanding, more aware of the situation. He was terrified. He had no idea who the masked man was, or that he would strike again. Perhaps Gilles was the target, given the nature of a predator reaching out on a dating site. Maybe this assailant was a stalker. On November 3rd, 2008, almost a month after Gilles was assaulted, investigators arrived to work, grabbed their coffee and sat down with Gilles Tetreault, anxious to fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle. Detectives listened as Gilles described how he met Sheena, and how insistent she was that they meet. He explained how she'd given him the directions, and when Tetreault arrived, how he walked into the garage to find the masked man with the stun gun. And he explained how he escaped. Police, enraptured by the story, chills climbing up their spine, felt as if they were listening to John Altinger. They would hear the exact same story. All the pieces lined up. The modus operandi was identical. Police had previously interviewed Mark Twitchell, the man who rented the garage. But Twitchell insisted that he had never met Altinger, and had no idea what had transpired at his garage studio. Investigators felt at the time he was being upfront and candid, speaking with honest surprise and confusion. But that isn't all that happened that day. After the interview, Twitchell called police to tell them he had purchased a new car, a red Mazda. The same year, the same make, the same model as the vehicle that John Altinger drove. The coincidence of the red hatchback was just too much to ignore or explain. In fact, Twitchell was never entirely off the radar at all. Police hadn't forgotten about him. In fact, he was at the very top of their suspect list. Did you think I had told you I hadn't left a single detail out from my narrative? Did you trust me not to withhold information? Now I ask you, why did you trust me? Because we're speaking to each other right now? I promise not to knowingly lie, but I want you to know something. If it was so easy for you to trust that what I was telling you was exactly how events played out in real time, imagine how easy it would be to take advantage of your loneliness. the most disparate of human emotions, and to escape it, you have to be open.
Taking the lead.
You have to make yourself vulnerable. Meeting new people is a dangerous game. Once again, investigators contacted Twitcher, who then agreed to come in for questioning voluntarily. He appeared to be an operating and concerned citizen, trying to help the police. Detectives asked him about the red hatchback, and Twitchell explained that he had purchased it on the side of the road. According to Twitchell, the man told him he had chatted with the who was looking to buy him a new car when they returned from vacation. That was the level for investigators. Had Twitchell been the one responsible for the attack and the disappearance of the singer? This didn't matter though, unless they were able to get a confession from Twitchell. Investigators had no evidence tying him to an actual crime. There was no body, no murder weapon, nothing to suggest that there was a crime, much less murder. As the questioning continued, detectives pressed him further, but to no end. Before Twitchell asked the questioning, police he revealed the secrets. And Twitchell tellingly responded, "You'd be surprised what I can live with." Investigators granted warrants to search Mark Twitchell's car, his house, his documents, and his computer, but they weren't finding the crucial evidence they needed. But 2 days after interrogating Twitchell, while police combed through finding nothing, they looked in his computer trash bin. In the trash bin, they found a file that Twitchell had deleted. The document was SK Confession. And as investigators skimmed the document, it was filled with SK sleepwear.
This is my story of my progression. Like just and you still
Changing man. Enemy personal radar in the air.
Detectives what they were looking at. Twitchell's SK confession. Telling them about the crime. Police compared the details in Twitchell's confession to the facts they already knew to be true, and they found a remarkably detailed account of the events. The document described the attack on Tetro and continued to detail the attack, murder, and dismemberment, as well as disposing of the body of a man Twitchell called Jim. This seemed to be the story of what happened to John Altinger.
Enemy near Main Street.
Talked to myself. He was probably to myself repeatedly.
Mark Twitchell was a massive movie fan. He often dressed up as his favorite character. One of his favorite television shows was Dexter, and it would be this character that Mark Twitchell was trying to emulate. Twitchell, as it appeared, wasn't as good as Dexter at covering his tracks. In fact, he was terrible. But that was the initial inspiration for what ultimately happened to John Altinger, and what almost happened to Gilles Tetro. Given the level of detail, police considered this to be Mark Twitchell's confession. And as such, Mark Twitchell spent Halloween 2008 in the back of a police cruiser under arrest. But one piece is not missing. Where was John Altinger's remains? Detectives took a car ride around Edmonton, trying to urge him to show police where he had disposed of Altinger. But Twitchell refused. The lead detectives on the case later visited Twitchell while he was in prison awaiting trial, once again trying to convince Twitchell to show him where John's body was. And once again Twitchell turned him away. But 9 months later, Mark Twitchell asked to meet with investigators with conditions. Detective Clark, the lead investigator on the case, could not be present. All the build-up and 9 months of frustration led to a meeting that lasted only 3 minutes. Twitchell handed them a Google Map printout, and in a note attached, the location of the street where Mark Twitchell disclosed of John Altinger in a sewer. In March 2011, he was on trial for first-degree murder. Taking the stand on his own behalf, Twitchell tried to convince the court and jury that he would lure Gilles and John to the garage to build publicity for his upcoming movie, assuming that when he let them go, they'd spread the news. It all went wrong, according to Twitchell, when John started to fight back, and in response, Twitchell had no choice but to defend himself. Remember the document titled SK Confessions? According to Twitchell, this wasn't a confession at all, but pure fiction. Nearly 4 hours later, the jury returned, able to tell this fiction was fact. On April 12, 2010, Mark Twitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life, with no possibility of parole. Edmonton can be a desperately lonely place. Canada's most northern major city, and it sits in the middle of Canada, surrounded by sprawling prairies. This also hosts some of the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets I've ever seen. The most dazzling lightning, but contrasting that mesmerizing sheet lightning and those surreal sunsets and sunrises is the fact that Edmonton is Toronto. And in the summer, while it's warm, it's also incredibly dusty. Much like the environment that Edmonton exists in, the people there can be both beautiful and cold. I met some of the most wonderful people in Edmonton. I also know the community in that city. Altinger's only crime was his loneliness, seeking out the company and companionship of others to survive in a world that sometimes we just feel lost in. He made himself vulnerable and open, and that's what you have to do when you're seeking companionship. But you can't always trust people. Trust can be a powerful thing, and it can also destroy you. Both John Altinger and Gilles Tetreault trusted the woman they were talking to online. And this trust very easily could have led to both John Altinger and Gilles Tetreault finding love. Someone was out there preying on vulnerability. John Altinger texted his friends letting them know where he'd be. Gilles Tetreault did not. It very easily could have been Gilles Tetreault who didn't make it out to stay alive. And John Altinger who did. So, Creep, did you enjoy today's episode? If you did, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. For each 5-star review, I get one step closer to moving out of my mother's basement. Tales by Cool is a weekly podcast and is released every Tuesday. If you don't want to miss a single episode, don't forget to subscribe. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter at TalesByCole and Instagram at ToldByCole. This episode was written and narrated by me, Cole Weavers, and sound engineering and editing by Matt Black. And with that, I bid you adieu. Be safe, take care of one another, and don't forget to lock the door.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
We've all been sold a lie. Your weight does not define you. You define you. Get 17 health metrics unique to your body with FitCheck and live your true health.
More Sarkic SCPs. Sarcasm is one of the most enigmatic and
Enemy
unique
incoming.
organizations
Weapons
in the
ready.
SCP. A religion dedicated to reshaping the world into that of war and disease, and reverting humanity back to a more base form. Archetypes, like any religion, come in all forms, with different beliefs and the majority of them represent a grave threat to normalcy. Overview of Sarcasm in a previous video, and I've looked at these anomalies in detail. This video will mostly be looking at the ones I mentioned in the video in greater detail, since they deserve a closer look. As a quick recap of Sarcasm, Sarcasm revere disease and the transformation of the human form through alterations of their flesh. But they don't see the universe is real. This is the Sarkites' greatest enemy was the Church of the Broken God, an opposing religion devoted to the broken God that gave intellect and broke itself.
Allied UAV overhead.
Speaking of the Sarkites, there are a number of parties within Sarkites who act as leaders for various groups. A 60-year-old that was formerly known as Alexei, who worked as a security guard for some time with the Soviet primary anomalous capability involves a microbial extreme neurological alterations in victims. The individual
Reloading.
This effect lasts until the individual is killed. The individual will become composed, retaining his memory. It's noted that 27 people can control more than one
UAV is ready for flyover.
At this location. Reloading.
In the year 1284, refers to speaking Russian, fluent English, German, and an archaic Uralic language than a modern variant of the Uralic language. 2075 introduces himself as facility for the same reason to explain his nature, he says that he was as there is no perfection in duality, and instead as for explaining his nature, he compares it to fighting with the color yellow. Period of political an archpriest of the Eastern Orthodox is accepting a witch and heretic.
Allied UAV overhead.
Ended up there.
Friendly Wilson on station beginning soon.
Describing it as a very complicated experience to observe a piece of yourself. After
ready for launch.
doctor will never win. He is also pursuing the apartment building, leading to
Check the fire! No transport on this target. Need recon at this location.
Division P refers to continuing to create conflicts.
Allied cluster strike incoming.
Well done.
Command will be pleased.
He taunts the doctor by asking if you cage the limb of never truly matter. He then recites a passage from Sarkic scripture, which is continued on by the two security personnel. The personnel then grab the doctor and stab him with an anomalous knife, which causes his body to massively distort and grow into an amorphous mass of flesh and bone. The entity that was once the doctor rampages through the facility before it's flooded with acid to eliminate it, resulting in a total of 56 fatalities. It seems that both of the security personnel had been infected by 2075 at some point in the past, likely before they joined the Foundation 10 years ago. It's also likely that Division P never truly contained 2075 either, only a part of it. An object depicting an Ouroboros, the symbol of infinity, was found in the remains of the site. Keeping in mind that 2075 is one of many Karsus across the world, each with their own highly anomalous capabilities, you can see how Sarkicism is such a threat to the normal way of life. Not every follower of Sarkicism is a powerful Karsist, though, with many of them simply living in small communes in rural areas isolated from the normal world. SCP-2133 is a village in the northern Urals in Russia, consisting of around 50 people. A number of microbial pathogens have been found within the vicinity of the village, some previously unknown, including the causative agents of leprosy, typhoid fever, cholera, and smallpox, along with various influenza viruses and plagues. This results in the inhabitants of the village often getting ill from various afflictions, although they rarely die from them. The villagers speak an archaic dialect of Russian, but commonly refuse to divulge substantial details about their history and traditions. Their lifestyle is similar to that of a 14th century peasant commune. They are believed to be illiterate. They display acute technophobia, and they share a religion they refer to as the Church of the Red Harvest. They show either an unwillingness or an inability to leave the village, and genetic analysis has revealed significant inbreeding, although they have never been seen undergoing reproduction while under containment. The villagers' primary anomalous trait is a form of reincarnation. Whenever one of them does die, their body will rapidly decay away, and on the night of the next new moon, the individual will be harvested from the village fields as a newborn infant, retaining their memories and appearance. Soil samples from the fields were found to contain embryonic fluid. Overall, the villagers tend to simply ignore the Foundation's presence, occasionally agreeing to be interviewed, but only displaying hostility when their daily routine is impeded. Foundation personnel are even allowed to enter and explore buildings without provoking a reaction, with the exception of their church. All attempts to access the church have provoked violent reactions from the villagers and the other odd entities residing in the village. These entities are prehensile organic structures, dark red in color, in the shape of a tentacle, with tissue samples showing them to be closely related to humans. They only become animate when personnel attempt to enter the church, typically killing the offender through strangulation and impalement. The villagers' routine consists of working the fields from dawn until dusk, in which they only grow turnips. and at sunset they will all enter the church, depositing the day's harvest within. They reside within the church for around 3 hours, before returning home to sleep until dawn. Other behavior seen amongst villagers includes staring aimlessly for up to 2 hours at a time, muttering incoherently, and self-amputation of gangrenous limbs and tumorous growths, which are then deposited inside the church. Analysis of their waste indicates a high-protein diet, despite turnips being their only food source. An interview is conducted by Dr. Judith Lowe with one of the villagers, Aristar, who appears as an elderly male missing his left arm and much of his skin has undergone necrosis. The man says that this all began in a time of scars and cons, possibly suggesting sometime in the 13th or 14th century. He says that his condition hurts, but the process rends sin from their bodies and prepares them for a paradise that never seems to come. It seems they made an agreement with a priestess in which they will continue to serve until paradise comes, at which point they will be allowed to enter it. He worries that they have failed the Great One somehow, or they have been forgotten, but then says that there must be no doubt, because the Church of the Red Harvest is the only truth. Another interview is conducted with a girl named Anya, appearing as a female, 6 to 8 years of age. The girl says that the doctor does not belong here, because she is not of the covenant and would not understand. They had signed a pact in blood, and it is both their redemption and curse until the end of all things. Dr. Lowe asks about the significance of the church, but the girl says that they should not be watching them, because they'll never understand. This is the land where gods of rust and blood come to die. To which Dr. Lowe simply replies that that doesn't answer her question. The girl explains that the church was actually here long before the village was, as the Church of Wood on the surface was originally a Christian church built on top of the Church of Stone beneath the earth. The girl says that the Foundation personnel here are only alive because the Karsus Alka allows it. Dr. Lowe's last question is if the village has a name, to which the girl responds by vomiting a black viscous liquid. It's unclear if that was coincidental or actually the name of the village, but the interview concludes. Obviously, the Foundation has to get inside of that church, so they send in an NPF to subdue the inhabitants of the village and enter the church. They are equipped with hazmat suits, video recorders, 3 hours of air supply, and incendiary weapons, which they utilize on the tentacles, causing them to recede into the soil. Inside of the church are several fetishes constructed from bone and leather, along with tumorous axes anchored by iron hooks chained to the ceiling. In the center of the church is a large fissure, which leads into a system of caverns beneath the village and the nearby mountains. There are no exploration logs here, to the disappointment of some, I'm sure, but they did encounter several new organisms in the caverns. These entities didn't seem to be hostile, but they were large and unwilling to leave the caves, so the MTF terminated one of them and brought it back for an autopsy. The entity weighed 181 kilograms, or around 400 pounds, and was over 8.5 feet tall. Its stomach contained only turnips, and displayed an overgrowth of fatty tissue and bone.
Shoot to kill.
Additionally, on the skin of its left forelimb was a tattoo, with the defunct blue finger. Prior to the MTF radio contact was suddenly lost without any time. They doctored the death. The rest of the team likely contracted a large number of diseases. Site command urges him to keep going to seek the silver tree so that the team didn't die. The doctor tried to move, but only wedged himself deeper into the slime. He tried again and manages to break free. They appear to be strong. He then claims to see wings and brings him to the chest. The last thing you hear he appears to be building some sort of the only parts of the religion working, and many elements of SCP these things in the flesh that is, which is generally believed to be the sarcite written records as early as the century being a some scholars which seems to be the Caliph dispatched to investigate the wall. The official and eventually found Zoroastrianism is a religion that predates Islam and is centered around a dualistic belief.
Take a seat.
Made by Yahoo The officials questioned the Magian as to why they continued to attack the wall, rather than simply digging into it and building a scaffold to climb over. But the Magian and the ceiling of heaven was exactly the height of the wall. When the official had seen enough, the Magian removed his hand, and the entities disappeared from his sight. The Magian finished by saying that the Caliph and the rulers of every civilized land needed to heed the threat of Yadru and Ajj. What exactly allowed the Magian to make the entities visible is unclear, but it's not the first time we've heard of invisible Sarkic monsters, as shown in SCP-2480, the Unfinished Ritual. Foundation investigation of the wall found a number of things buried near it, including ancient weapons, armor, and currency. They found a collection of gears and other machine parts that were likely used in the wall's construction, many of which are stamped with mechanite seals. There was also a mass grave containing altered human skeletons, resembling known specimens of Sarkic creatures, and a large clay cylinder containing a record written in Old Persian about the construction of the wall. The record praises Cyrus the Great, who marched along with his army to confront the invaders who sailed out from Ataton, known as the Sarkic capital. The invaders were led by two Karsus, and although Cyrus's army initially drove them back to this mountain pass, the onslaught was endless, and even the army's elite warriors, the companions, could not hold them back. Cyrus decided to build a wall instead to contain them, and traveled to Ionia, where he enlisted the Mechanite builder priests. They proceeded to build a great wall from blocks of iron, and poured over it a layer of consecrated brass, so that the army will be sealed away in another realm until the end of time. The Foundation believes that if and when the wall is ever breached, it may constitute an XK-class dominance shift scenario, which mostly matches what's stated in the Quran. So there you have an enraged horde of Sarkic monsters that have been festering and raging for the last 2,600 years or so. If they ever do break through the wall, or if some other Sarkic group helps them get out, it would likely be a pretty big problem. Speaking of big problems, let's finish by looking at SCP-2191, a temple complex located within the Hoya Forest in Romania. The first two floors of this complex resemble similar Eastern Orthodox monasteries in the region, but it's believed that this was a deliberate effort to disguise the temple's true nature. Beneath the complex are a series of tunnels, richly constructed from the temple is creatures considered to be genetically should undergo several significant mutations that would be quite fatal. Major internal organs, your lungs, heart, their skin lacks pigmentation and resembles cracked corpses. And they ended up completely androgynous. Drop them. Like in strong light. That's halfway. Taking the hard point. Allied. We are in command here. Appear to have aged at all and possess an abnormally the enemy from the hard point. Hard point is resemble wolves in some way. It's been speculated by the Foundation that did not naturally raise them as that's a hard point. Stand by. UAV is ready for flyover. These creatures are pointing inside the abdomen of the two bodies. Would be. Strength exists within the walls of the effectively positioning into a posture.
10 seconds. Get ready to move.
The temple humans, ignoring all other animals.
Online. In the hole. Get to the next one.
The entity contact them with a catalytic agent delivered by a dog. And then proceeding into its the worm creature in their abdomen to emerge.
Friendly carrier
muscles and bones.
Enemy UAV overhead.
Drink. 20 to 50 minutes, depending on the person's size. This fluid then residing in the walls.
Stand by.
For quite some time. But the foundation
Enemy hardpoint contested. Hardpoint lost.
when inexplicably
Hardpoint lost. 1 minute remaining. Victory is easy. Hold them back. Hardpoint.
with dormant state in 1924.
Enemy at the
There were a
purple.
series of incidents, however, between 1932 in Greece, an earthquake resulted in 491 reported casualties.
Allied.
Later attributed
Enemy's got the hardpoint. Enemy at the purple. 10 seconds. Ready. Enemy UAV overhead. UAV is out of fuel.
In 1940, going missing
Get ready. We're about to move.
It seems that
Next one.
Let the time go out.
Got the hardpoint.
Get off the
We've lost radar. Very good.
This entity is sapient and is controlled by creatures in through the release of complex pheromones. It seems that civilians living in isolated villages have been actively providing human sacrifices to 2191 to prevent earthquakes from occurring. An interview is conducted by Dr. Judith Lowe with a village elder from one of the villages, who's knowledgeable about 2191. The woman says that the temple is where the mother resides, who sends her faithful bees to collect nectar. And like good beekeepers, they help the hive flourish. The mother was once a Davite princess that Grand Parsis Ion wanted to conquer and claim for himself. She eventually became his favorite concubine and worshipped him, so the Grand Parsis blessed her with his sacred seed, according to the elder. This resulted in her swelling up in size and being placed here, and they must keep her fat and satisfied so that she can eventually give birth. give birth to what exactly is left merely to our imagination. But the Elder ends the interview by stating that all around us is tinder for the gods. The Foundation is caught between a rock and a hard place then, since if they allow this entity to continue being fed, it will eventually give birth to what will also likely be a world-ending threat. But if they try and contain it, it can easily cause far more devastation than it currently is. Of course, the correct answer in this case would be to attempt to simply kill this creature. But the Foundation has so far failed in that goal, and has spent a number of civilian and Foundation lives that goes well beyond acceptable numbers. They don't like it, but for now they're going to simply let things continue as they were, with the villagers offering up sacrifices and letting it feed. They note that they are not currently about to sacrifice the entire Balkan Peninsula just to contain this threat. At least, not yet. Obviously, there are a lot more Sarkic SCPs, as they are one of the major factions within the SCP universe. But these four are some of the more